Hey guys, welcome to my channel. So I'm in Switzerland for a couple of days, and so on this trip I decided, let me take on this challenge. Let me try to see if for 2 days in Switzerland I can spend less than 100 francs. So that's about 90 euros. And that would just be covering, for example, accommodation, food and transport. So those are just the 3 things that I'm focused on, and more or less those are the only expenses that I have within the time that I'm here. Whenever I travel, I'm always trying to travel as cheap as possible. I try to spend as little money as possible because for me it's kind of exciting to try to get creative, to find ways of saving money and to pretty much just live with the bare minimum. Switzerland is known to be like one of the most expensive countries in Europe. In comparison to many other European countries, you find yourself spending much more money for certain things in Switzerland. What makes this challenge even more interesting is that I'm in Interlaken, and this place is a tourist hotspot. It's known for its wonderful hiking trails. There are like 2 big lakes on either side of this little place. The village is more or less interlocked between these 2 lakes, and so it's a really beautiful place. It's a popular place, hotspot for tourists. So you can expect that the prices most likely would not necessarily be as low as maybe other places where regular people live and so on. Now, accommodation can easily be very expensive in Switzerland. I mean, when I was searching for different hotels within Interlaken, I recognized that there were like some crazy prices. I was like, I'm not gonna pay that amount of money. As always, I decided to go for hostels because hey, they're cheaper and they have a lot of different amenities that will actually help me to more or less save money. The hostel that I chose is called Backpackers Villa. No, it isn't the cheapest hostel that I found. There was a hostel that was maybe like about 40 euros or so cheaper than this one. I selected a room with 10 beds, but I got upgraded to a room with 6 beds. I think it's because of the Booking Genius program or something like that. And then when I came here, they told me that only 2 people would be in the rooms because of Corona and so on. So to more or less ensure that there's some social distancing and so on. But what was really surprising for me was that when I was checking in, and she was just going through a list of like so many different things that are available at this hostel. And so 40 francs per night, so 2 nights, and that's already 80 francs that are gone. And I don't regret spending that much because, as I said, I could have spent much less to get another hostel, but this hostel has definitely exceeded my expectation. I mean, this place is really built like for backpackers, and it's really built for travelers. Like even something as simple as that you have like outlets right at the beds, and you have a lamp. There's like a nice little balcony here with a view of the mountains. It's just perfect. So the money was definitely well spent. The next big thing would be transportation. And it's a small place, so transportation wasn't a big factor. But again, something that's really cool about Interlaken is that they actually give you like what they call a visitor's pass, and it allows you to pretty much take all the buses and the trains within Interlaken, so you don't have to pay any extra money for this. So for the entire time that I'm here, this card is valid and I can take all the buses and the trains. This definitely contributed to me being able to save quite some money, because then when I wanted to go to other places, then I could just take this to the last valid stop, and then from there I would book the tickets. Even if I didn't get this card, I would still be able to save money on transportation because I'm the type of traveler that I kind of walk everywhere. I love walking because I find it to be a very effective way of discovering somewhere. The only expense that I had for transport was a train that I took to another place. It's another small town. I don't know if they're towns or villages because they're actually quite small. But yeah, I took the train there, and so that was like 6 francs to get there. And that's the only expense that I have for transport. Apart from that, it's just been walking and hiking and running everywhere else. The last thing, food. And of course, I think food can be one of the most expensive things whenever you travel. You want to buy good food, and the thing is, if the food is too expensive, then you might think, okay, it must be really good. And if it's too cheap, it might not be that good. So it's very easy to end up spending a lot of money on food. And as I mentioned before, I chose this hostel because it offers breakfast. I just kind of thought having breakfast here would be good, because then I don't need to be kind of thinking about, okay, where am I going to buy breakfast? Normally I would just even go to the supermarket to buy items for breakfast, like to buy breads or to buy fruits and to buy like nuts and those things. That's kind of my travel food. I don't necessarily go to a restaurant to buy breakfast, because for me that's like somewhat of a waste of money, for me at least. In the morning I would really stack up, so that's when I would have a big breakfast. And in any case, that's kind of the way I like live, where I try to have like a really big breakfast in the morning, because it more or less gives me the energy to make it through the day. And then because every day I was doing a lot of intense activity, having a good breakfast was a lifesaver, because then I had enough power to make it through the day, and I didn't have to worry about, okay, what am I going to eat for lunch, because sometimes even until 2-3 o'clock I was still okay. Another cool thing about this hostel is that they offer free coffee, tea and hot chocolate. So pretty much every single day I've been having hot chocolate. After such a long day of hiking, coming back and just having a little cup of hot beverage was, I must say, really life-saving. It was really refreshing. So yeah, breakfast was covered. So the only thing that I had to be concerned about was like having snacks in the day for when I was hiking, and dinner. And so for the snacks, what I did was that I went to the supermarkets and I bought breads, and I bought like some nuts, and I also had some like fruits and so on. So that was pretty much what I had for the hikes. With hostels, they tend to have, for example, like kitchens where you can then make your own food, and that's not something that you'd get at some luxury hotel or whatever. So that's definitely a big plus for hostels, because then that gives you the opportunity to say, hey, I'm just going to go to the supermarket, I'm going to buy some food, and I'm going to come back and cook. And that works out to be cheaper than eating at any restaurant anywhere. I bought, for example, like some items to make spaghetti, and that was like super cheap in comparison to what I would pay for even probably the cheapest fast food here in Switzerland. So that's definitely a great way to save money. Let's take a look at the summary. So as I mentioned before, the hostel I paid like 40 francs. Well, to be exact, it was 78 francs. And then for transportation, I had like 6 francs for the train. And for food, so the first time that I went hiking on the first day, I spent 4 francs 50, and then the second time it was like 3 francs. The first night I didn't have to buy dinner, because the guy that I met in the hostel, he was so kind enough to buy me something for dinner. And then for dinner the second time around, I paid like 4 francs 15. The total that I spent would just be 95 francs and 65 cents. And then that would just be like 86 euros and 75 cents. So that I definitely accomplished what the goal that I had in mind. I mean, if I'd selected a cheaper hostel, I think I could have saved a lot more, and maybe I could have even gone for 3 days, depending on how cheap the hostel would have been. This is just to show that it's like really possible to like travel cheap wherever you go. Even if it's an expensive place, there are still ways that you can cut back on expenses and not like have to break a bank to like pay for different things. The thing is, it doesn't necessarily matter like how expensive the place is, because it always depends on how you travel. Like if you come here and you book like a hotel or even something that's like middle luxury or something, and if you're taking the train or the buses like every single minute of the day, then you're going to be spending much more money. So again, the fact is, traveling doesn't have to be expensive. Something that I notice here, for example, is that there's a big emphasis on the cable cars and the different trains here. So it's like whenever they advertise the different attractions, they advertise it saying, okay, you can take this cable car to go there and this train to go there and whatever stuff. And in my mind, I'm like, why? I could simply walk. If I go walking, if I go hiking, then it's a much more exciting experience. It's a much more memorable experience than sitting on a cable car like for 10-15 minutes. What makes a difference is how you travel. And if you find these ways and if you get creative, then you recognize that there are so many different ways that you can actually cut expenses and you can actually spend your money on things that really matter. So that's pretty much a challenge that I had for this trip. Hopefully you could pick up a few tips and tricks of how you can cut back the expenses and like save on certain things. So yeah, thank you so much for watching the video, and see you in the next video.